I'm sitting down today to speak with Robert Woods. Robert is a former Gucci designer. He is also an author. Robert is also a professor and in the process of completing his doctoral degree. I was very happy to see that Robert had prepared a scrumptious meal before our interview. Everything was wonderful.
And when we see where the mistakes are, and we know the paths that many of them not necessarily should follow to completion, but at least get on that path, I think it's our duty.
Our unrehearsed conversation actually flowed very well. As it turns out, there's a reason for that. Robert and I had attended the same university in Kentucky, a historically black college, HBC, Kentucky State University in Frankfort, Kentucky. Robert explains how attending Kentucky State University helped catapult his career.
Winona Fletcher was her name. And she would direct all of the theatrical productions at Kentucky State University while I was an undergraduate there. And I would always be in the theater department. But I was really interested in the theater. And she directed that department there. And I would always get into plays, and when I got ready to graduate, she says, you ought to think about going to the University of Iowa. Greg Morris, the black guy on Mission Impossible.
Oh, yes, yes.
He was one of the black guys who graduated there, so it wasn't a lot of black people in that. And we do things like Dames at Sea, The Cat and the Canary, all of these different things, these different types of shows, When You're Coming Back, Red Ryder, those kind of things like that.
Just before the beautiful sun set, Robert and I continued our conversation.
I'm in the borough of Metuchen in New Jersey with fashion designer Mr. Robert Woods, and we're going to chat with him just a few minutes because he has such a wonderful story and so many experiences that we're anxious to hear about. So thank you once again for having me here.
Thank you for having me.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful evening. I appreciate your opening your doors. We had a wonderful lunch, as you can tell. So, you're a fashion designer, you've performed on many morning shows, and how did all of this come about for you?
Wow, that's interesting. A lot of people ask me, how did I move from being a professor and then going into the fashion arena? It started, Deborah, with my parents. My mom was a great dresser, my father was a very dapper dresser, and I remember my brothers and I sitting in the backyard on Saturdays. And on Saturdays was the day that they went to the mall. And of course, if you were a kid and you went to the mall, you got things, you know. So they would always, at around a certain hour, they would, my mom and my dad would open the screen door and she says, who wants to go to the mall with us? And we'd all say, I do, but we've been playing. And they would say, she would look at us, she said, you're not going behind me looking like somebody else's kid. And that meant we weren't dressed right.
Okay.
So I would, as time went on, we would get dressed for that moment. So we knew what time they were going to come and look, and say, okay, you can come. Okay. And we'd get all these little toys and things. So when I moved to New York, I was doing this audition, actor's audition, and I remember it was in the Soho area. And it was a rainy Saturday. And at that time, most of the actors would like put on blue jeans and sneakers because actors always think that, well, you know, it's not about what I'm wearing. I can become anybody because I'm an actor. But I never believed that. I always believed that, you know, when you want to make an impression, 55% of people accepting you when they see you for the first time is based on your appearance. 38% is the sound of your voice. And only 7% is your talent. So no one gets to see your talent unless they like that 55% of what they're looking at. And then, of course, you can look great but sound awful. So those two variables are working with me. So that particular rainy day, and it was really raining, I did not dress in blue jeans because of the weather. I always wore a part in my head. You can't see it now. A part in my head, pretty much like the 1930, 40 look. I like to dress like that, the big baggy pants and the white buck. And that's the way I was dressed. And little did I know, when I went into that audition studio, I was going to do this little piece called Charlie Brown, where he sits on the bench eating a peanut butter sandwich, talking about Lucy the Redhead.
Right.
I was going to do that. I had this peanut butter sandwich that I had all week. You know, it's your prop. You go to all your auditions with it. And I had that with me, and I sat in front of this group of people at this long table, and they were speaking a funny language, and I'd never heard Italian before. And I'd always taken, I'd taken French in high school and French in college, but I wasn't really good at it, but I could understand some words. So whenever anybody spoke any foreign language to me, whether it was German, Chinese, or what, I'd speak French. It's the only one I knew. So I was doing this, and they kept having this little conversation with among themselves, and I heard one French word. And that was from Faustino, the designer who eventually hired me. And I started talking in French, and then he was able to communicate with me.
Wow.
Now, I don't know what the other people who were auditioning did, because you go in one at a time. But I was there, and he started talking about what I had on, as opposed to what I was going to do with my talent. Because unbeknownst to me, this was a designing company out of Italy. Later it was called Meucci, not Gucci, Meucci. And they specialized in fur coats and outerwear. And that's who Faustino was, their head designer. He wanted an assistant. But he wanted the assistant to be American because they were doing a lot of business with America and things like that.
Okay.
And he thought that actors were very versatile. And that's why he was there. And I didn't know anything about that. So I did the audition and talked to them. They kept asking me about my dress and everything. Did the audition, gave them my 8x10, and went home. And then about a month or so later, maybe 2 months later, I got a call. And they said, this is Meucci, and we were in New York, and we saw you in audition, and we'd like you to come to Italy and work with our designer. And I said, I can't go to Italy, I'm an actor. And we don't leave. You know? So I literally hung up the phone. I couldn't believe, I didn't even know that they were fashion people with the audition, you know? So this call just seemed out of the blue. It's a prank. So I hung up the phone in a very gentle way, a very nice way. And about another month or so, this has to be around October, I got a call again. And they said, our design team is coming through New York on their way to Brazil. Would you like to join them? And I said, who is this? They said, this is Meucci, and the designer Faustino got your information, and he would like to meet and know more about you, and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, it was a dry season for acting. So I said, okay, I never had a passport, Deborah. I never had any of that. So I went to that Brazilian consulate, which is across from St. Patrick's Cathedral, where you see the Atlas holding the big
Yes,
thing.
yes.
That's where I went to get the passport. And my first passport ever, because I've never been out of the country. And they said, your ticket is going to be at the British Airway, which was on 23rd, right, 23rd and at Broadway, at that area there. So I went and got the ticket, and sure enough, the design team came through. I met them at the airport, and we went to Brazil. It happened to be carnival time.
Wow.
And I just thought it was great. All the design team was there, and they kept throwing it. And we went on the beach, Copacabana, and they were showing me little things of what the camicia was, and la scarpe for the shoes. They draw the picture and told me this was shoes and scarpe, la pantalone. They were doing all of that with me, and I started learning it. You know, I said, well, this is fun. I said, but if it doesn't work, I can go home. You know, it was a vacation for me. But it turned out when I got back from Brazil, I liked it, and they were very sincere. And so I cleaned my apartment out, and I put it in a U-Haul truck. I'd never driven a stick shift before. I tore that truck out. Getting across the George Washington was my first mistake. And I took it to my parents' home, and I dumped my stuff there, and I got on the airplane with 2 suitcases. And I went to Florence, Italy.
Wow.
And in Florence, Italy, I had a schedule where I woke up in the morning, and I went to the language. They had the School of Burlesque. And that's where I learned the language, the Italian language. I went there for 2 years. I went there my hours were from like 8 o'clock until 12:30. And then at 1:30, I went to the Scuola di Modelli. And that's where I learned how to make pattern making and sewing and stuff like that. And that lasted until about 5:30. And then at 6 o'clock, I went to work in the factory with Faustino. That was my day.
Wow.
And I did that and did that.
Whoa,
It was my day.
That's some day.
It was a day, but I enjoyed it because I was learning. I had all the education. See, what I like people to know is that I would never have been so successful at that had I not got my master's degree before this happened.
I see.
So the education made me feel very good. And of course, when I was learning the language, my Italian counterparts would say, oh, Robert, you don't need to speak Italian that well. Everybody knows you're American. But I believed in that saying, as a man speaketh, so is he. As a man writeth, so is he. And if I was going to speak the language, I wanted to sound like I was educated. And that's what I did. So I speak sometimes when we would go on our trips. we'd be on the airplanes, and they would other passengers would say, "Oh wow, I didn't know there were any black Italians."
Oh, really? Say, well, thank you.
I would speak it so well. I still
Wow.
speak Italian very, very well. So that's how I got started in that. And Faustino would do the outerwears I mentioned, fur, leather, shearling, things like that. And I would be his pattern maker, you know. And he also had a contract with Gucci, Paolo Gucci.
Okay.
And of course, I would make the patterns, and of course, when he'd do the designs, I would go for the fittings with the fit models with Gucci present. And one day out of the blue, he just asked me while I was fitting the models, he says, "How would you like to design my men's line?" Again, this goes back to how I look, because when I got the audition in New York, I looked a certain way because my parents had, and of course, when I went around him, I looked a certain way, like I knew about men's fashion. And he asked me to do that, and I scratched my chin like this, and I went back to Faustino, my designer, and he said, "Okay, that's good. Here's how you're going to do that, and this is how much money you're going to ask for, and this is what you're going to do, and this other thing." And he told me all of that.
So he mentored you. He didn't hold that against
He
you.
didn't hold me at all. No. He knew this was a
abandoning
great
him.
opportunity. And at the time, I had my own studio called the Robert Wood Studio, where I had hired some pattern makers to work for me because Faustino was big. He designed for Nino Ricci.
Wow. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
And Roberto Cavalli.
Really?
Yes. So I knew all of these guys. I'd sit at their table and eat with them and everything, you know, and I did all of that. And so when he told me how to act, the core for that, which was an Italian core, how to ask for the money, the working hours, and I did, and Gucci accepted. And so I did that with him for about 4 years. And when he died, when Gucci died, that's when I was over there for about 12 to 13 years.
Oh, you were?
In Florence, Italy.
Oh,
12 to 13
really?
years. And when he died, that's when I had this desire to come back to America.
So you have people in different arenas who like to think that they are a part of that world, though maybe they have no training or experience or
Yes.
anything like that. So how do you recognize a fashion faux pas from real fashion?
Ooh. Well, I love that faux pas word. You know it. Because one of the things that you're going to do is, if you're in this industry, you have like these little antennas. And you do read. And you know what the forecasters. Now, forecasters are these people, and this is something that probably needs to be made very clear. We designers don't know it all. We have a group of people. Some of them are lodged in Paris. We have an American Association of Forecasters here. But we have a group of people who specialize in knowing what's hot and what's not, and what's going to be hot and what's not. Sort of like weather forecasters. And that's for the color, the fabrics, and things like that. So we designers, we have to really be keyed in on that. So we know that if you're wearing an animal print or a camouflage print, a military print or something like that, and it was yesteryears, we know that's old. But see, this is what the public doesn't know. I call them fashion victims.
Oh, fashion victims.
Fashion victims, and they don't know they're out there because they think they're hot. You know,
Yeah, right.
They think they're hot and they don't know. But a lot of the industry depends on fashion victims. We depend on a lot of people who have no idea about what's in and what's not, because retailers sell that to them.
Okay.
You know, but a faux pas is one of those things, you know, when you've read the In magazines, WWD is really like the Bible of the fashion industry.
Oh.
We read that daily. And of course, you must attend shows. I go consistently to Fashion Week at Lincoln Center. I'm a staple there, you know, and you see what the designers are coming out with. You get to meet other people in the industry. It's necessary that you be in the right place at the right time to be seen and to see what's going on, you know, because you have designers from all walks of life. And every designer has a different take. For example, they all have what they call their little niche. We don't need 2 pencil skirts. You know, someone has to do it a little different.
Okay.
And so the faux pas come when we know that, you know, that's not in season. Sometimes it's the silhouette, the shape of the garment. For example, if we are having like the notch collar, which you're wearing, for example, the notch collar, if that's hot, then that's in. If it's a double-breasted, for men, you know, if it has the 2 vents in the back, that's the trend. And so that's hot and that's not. So when you see somebody really not wearing that, although men are a little different than women, you kind of know if they're in. So when you see these fashionistas, they keep abreast with that.
Okay.
And so they know what's going on. They know what we know.
So these trends, who's more apt to start a trend? Is that from a particular country, a particular company, to say, okay, this year it's print, this year it's this cut? How does that evolve? Who's the one to say that this is the trend for now?
Trends come from the consumers.
Oh.
The people bring the trends.
Really?
A lot of times, if you've been to Central Park on a Sunday and when it's really warm in the summer, and you know where they do the roller skating near
Right.
the fountain, usually you'll see people coming from the different barrels. They'll go there, and these people may be factory workers or just normal 9-to-5 workers, but on the weekend they sort of let themselves evolve. And the way they wear their hair, the jewelry that they put on, and blah, blah, blah. We send out what we call scouts.
Really?
Yes, and we see what's going on. We can see if a trend. If more people are wearing their hair like you now, we say that may be a trend. If they're wearing one earring larger than the other, that could be a trend. If they're wearing their socks, all of that's a trend.
Wow.
We used to do it a different way in Italy. I used to have a summer place in Riccione. It's where a lot of the designers would go, because they had these really extravagant nightclubs up there. But a lot of designers would go, and they had this street called Via Ciccarelli. And of course, when you went to those different clubs and things at night, a lot of the models, the German models and the Italian models, the English models, they would all go into this locale, because that's where the fashion industry sort of localized. And this street called Via Ciccarelli, and it was full of little tables like this and little bars, and so you go there and you get your Irish cream coffee, and you'd be there about 11:30, 12 o'clock, because you dare not get to the clubs until about 1:30. And so we would be there, the designers would be there, some of the designers came in, we would have our little sketch pads, and we would see the people walk down Via Ciccarelli. And these were normal people who came from Rome, Milan, Florence, and they'd come up there for the party life at night. Some of them drove all day. And they would be dressed up, and they'd be walking the streets like that, and we'd see that little skirt, and we'd make a little notch on it, see this guy in there make a little notch on it. So they determine it.
I see.
And we get it from the streets.
Okay.
So we call that sometimes a trickle-up effect.
Okay.
Because it comes from the people who we consider the lower level, and it triples up to the bigger side. On the other hand, sometimes you have royalty or people who are way up there, and it trickles down. This is like what we do with Michelle Obama, for example. When she wears something, then she puts it in fashion, and it trickles down to us.
Okay.
But a lot of the fashion comes from the streets, and it trickles up. Most designing houses will have a group of people that they actually send out from time to time to see what the people in the streets are wearing. And then we modify it. Oh, I'll give you a perfect example. You know the urban look when the guys would wear the pants around their butt and the underwear would show.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, we don't like that. We don't like that, but we don't like. But to show you, you know, that started in prison.
Right.
And of course, when it came out, the public saw it and they began to like it. Well, then you had designers like Tommy Hilfiger who said, "Okay, they're showing this underwear. Let me make some colorful underwear for them to show them with that." You know. So this is another way in which designers utilize what was on the street and put it in the stores.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a good example.
Yeah, that's how they do that.
Capitalize on that.
All for that, you know.
Okay. And it worked.
It worked. But sometimes we make mistakes. A few years ago, we forecast that women were going to be wearing more dresses and more skirts and things like that, because you see, when women don't put on dresses and skirts and stuff like that, they buy less in the retail stores, because you need stockings, you need different shoes, you need jewelry and things like that. So we designers were really trying to get you guys to put on some skirts, you know, and some dresses, but you just said,
I was gonna say, how did that work for you?
It didn't work. It did not work, because there's this culture with the pant, and the pant is still here today.
Yes.
Now, if you look in some of the windows today, you'll see we're still trying to do that. You don't see it as much for the Christmas holidays. But when the fall and the spring collections come out, you're going to see a lot of dresses, silhouettes with dresses, because we still want you guys to dress up a little more, you know, spend the money. Same thing for men, you know, when we wear those khakis and those loafer shoes and things, like, we don't put on the suit. With the suit comes the tie, with the shirt, with the belt, with the socks, with the shoes. So that's what they want.
Okay. I guess one of my last questions is, who would you consider the top 5 designers, and why?
And why? I like Tracy Reed. I like Tracy Reed because of her story. You know, that she's one of the designers that designed Michelle Obama's dress at one time. Tracy, black designer.
Okay.
And she started out, started her own business, started and failed the first time, but had this voglio, as they say in Italian. She had this strong desire to succeed, and she came back, and she's one of those designers that she's not plastered on the side of every bus or every building that you see, but her clothes are unique, they're well made, they're stylish, every woman would feel proud in her clothes, would feel beautiful in her clothes. I like her because I think that her story is very interesting, but not only that, she has the talent to do that.
Why do you think we've not heard more about her?
I think that there's some designers, I think with designers you have to look at them a little bit like actors. There's some actors that you see in films and they're really good, but you don't see them plastered all over the tabloids. But when you see their work, it's really, really good, you know, but they're not all out there with every scandal and things. They like their private lives.
Which doesn't mean that they're any less successful.
Exactly. My favorite designer was Alexander McQueen, who's no longer here. He committed suicide, but he was brilliant. I last saw his show at the Met.
Really?
But yeah, you know, he's the one that did the Armadillo shoe, the shoe that Naomi Campbell fell in.
Oh,
yeah,
yes, yes.
Shoe. Well, he had such a brilliance. McQueen is one, and I like Roberto Cavalli. He uses a lot of animal skins. I like what he does. And another one of my designers that I really kind of like, Isaac Mizrahi. He does a line that is affordable. It's convenient for all of these people who don't want to think that they're walking the runways. But when you put it on his chic, he has a really nice idea of what women should look like. So I like him too.
Okay. Mr. Woods, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Hodge. Thank you so much. I appreciate
and the conversations. It's all been wonderful. So I say, let's toast to that.
To that.
Yeah.